In today's first reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah, notice how God, speaking through Isaiah, says, I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. And then he goes on to talk about, how no more shall there be in it an infant that lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. For one who dies 100 years will be considered a youth, and one who falls short of 100 will be considered accursed. So this reference to the new heaven and the new earth, yes, we could say it refers to the end of time when Christ returns in glory and there will be a new heaven and a new earth. But it's really referring to the coming of the kingdom of Christ. And this is why those who are close to God, it's saying they will be healthier, they will live longer, even past 100. Now, would this apply to everyone? Well, probably not. But it's also true to say that we don't really live the kingdom as we ought. And if we did live the kingdom as we ought, I think we would be better off even regarding our physical health. So, when we look at the lives of the saints, there are some saints who died very young. Saint Therese of Lisieux, I think she was 26 when she died. Saint Bernadette Soubirous, she was 35, I think, when she died. So some saints died very young, some even younger than that. But there are also some saints who lived to be very old. Take, for example, Saint Anthony of the Desert, Saint Anthony of Egypt. It's interesting because I think he was around 20 years old when he underwent his conversion, and he withdrew from society and lived as a hermit for the remainder of his life, and basically he was fasting every day, and yet he lived to be 105 years old. Or think, for example, of Saint Andre Bessette here in Canada, who died in 1937. He lived to be 92 years old. Okay, it's not past 100, but it's still a wonderful age to live to. It's an old age to live to. But the significance in the life of Saint Andre Bessette is that he had very poor health from birth. And his health was so poor that he was very small in stature. In fact, in some of the pictures, like, his head looks huge compared to his body, because his body is just, he's basically skin and bones. So he didn't grow very much during his lifetime, and he couldn't hold food down. He couldn't eat. The only thing he could eat was a little bit of flour mixed with water. And it's like, where are you getting your vitamins, your minerals from, if that's all you're eating all the time, plus the Eucharist? So he lived to be 92 years old. Well, how is this possible? Well, obviously, it's a miracle of God. And we hear about many saints who lived many years on nothing but the Eucharist, including Saint Padre Pio and many others. So how is this possible? So, yes, it's true, some saints, they died young, and, God allows nature to take its course. Some people get cancer, there's viruses, illnesses, plagues at various times, so sometimes people die young. I mean, even the 3 children of Fatima, right? The 2 younger ones, Francisco and Jacinta, they died when they were very young. They died just shortly after the apparitions in Fatima, and Our Lady had predicted that they will soon be in heaven, but very holy individuals nevertheless. But imagine if everybody took their faith seriously. Think of Saint Anthony of Padua, right? A great miracle worker. And it's not just our Lord who raised the dead to life, but many of the saints did also. Imagine if we had saints like Saint Anthony in our midst today, so that he could heal people, give them a new lease on life. Just like in today's gospel reading, there's this young boy, the son of the official, he's basically dying. But Christ gives him a new lease on life. He becomes a new creation. So when we are baptized, we become a new creation. So the boy who's healed, he doesn't necessarily become a new creation, but he has a new lease on life. He's given a new life, we could say, a new chance at life. But when we are baptized, we become a new creation. And the New Jerusalem is the church. So all the faithful who are part of the church are part of the New Jerusalem, which was referenced in today's first reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. So this new creation, this new heaven and this new earth, it begins with Christianity. So Christ establishes a new creation. So when we receive the grace of God into us, we are transformed. We become a new creation because we have the life of God within us. We're no longer just regular human beings, but we're transformed human beings. We're sanctified human beings. We have God within us. We are different from those who lack the sanctifying grace of God in their lives. So we've become a new creation. And because we've become a new creation, we have this ability to love. We have this ability to draw closer to God, to receive the blessings of God. And we see this in the lives of the saints, as I mentioned. So they're able to do miracles, but also some of them live to be very long. In other words, they're very healthy, even though they're fasting or hardly eating anything and not getting sufficient nutrients, but God sustains them. So the ideal is that we strive to be as close to God as we can be, and that's good for us spiritually, for our spiritual health. It's good for us psychologically, for our psychological health. But it's also very good for us for our physical health. Doesn't mean we're going to live to be 100 or more. Doesn't mean that we might not get cancer. But when we are closer to God, it becomes easier for us to deal with those difficulties, even if it means we're going to die from cancer or whatever it may be. But sometimes God will work miracles. And even if he doesn't, even doctors assert that those individuals who have faith, who believe in God, and who pray, they do much better than those who do not. So in other words, if we want God's blessings in our lives, then we need to focus on our relationship with him. And we are called not just to think about ourselves, but to think about others. And I mentioned, imagine a society where everyone was striving to be a perfect Christian. There would be no crime. There would be no anger. There would be no resentment. There would be no hatred. And because people would be more loving and kind and more social, even just from the human perspective, all of those things would contribute to making us healthy persons. I recently read a book that talked about the fact that socializing is a necessary aspect of our human nature, and we need to socialize, and texting and emails and all these things, it's not a real way of socializing. We need to socialize in person. And there have been studies that have been done, I mentioned this before, on infants who are deprived of all human contact. Their diapers are changed, they're given food, they're given medicine if they get sick and everything. And these infants, they end up dying because they're deprived of human contact. And that human contact is really love, right? And mothers love their children. They pick them up, they hold them, they hug them. The children feel the love. So we need love in order to be healthy. We need first and foremost the love of God. And secondly, we need to love our neighbor, and we need to be loved by our neighbor also.